G'day, fans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of DNA Reviews. We're here to talk about the old Docky Who. Absolutely awesome. We're past halfway through the season. Mr. Aaron is sitting right there, chomping at the bit to talk about this particular episode. Mr. Aaron, how you going, old son?
I was just wondering if people knew DNA Reviews was Dags and Aaron. It's like the Lennon McCartney of movie reviews, isn't it?
I tell you what, and we get into the absolute nitty-gritty, the virtual DNA, if you will, of these particular shows. That's how detailed we are, right down to the atomic level, which is a
Yeah.
particularly cool.
And Colin is always along for the ride. Always appreciate that he comes along, even though he's the more into Star Trek than Doctor Who.
That's exactly right. There's got Mr. Colin, as we just mentioned, and good old, of course, Greg is with us as well. Before we get into the episode, there's something I actually want to bring up, and of course, we are talking about the old Docky Who. This is actually regards to last week's episode, 73 Yards. One of the things that came up, and I was not aware of this, is the actress who plays Ruby Sunday is only 19 years old in real life. I didn't know that. I thought she was in her early 20s, mid 20s. And for that reason, when she was playing a 40-year-old, I actually thought she pulled it off really well. I thought it was actually very convincing because I thought, she's only has to age an extra 15 years or so, not a problem. But if she's got to age like 21 years, I have to say that I just wanted to put that in because I didn't mention it last week. And I wanted to say I thought she did a really good job.
Do you know what I figure? I figure with 40 years of advanced technology, Oil of Ulan will be much, much better then.
Oil of Ulan. Oh, my God. Very, very cool. But anyway, that was last week. 73 yards or 67 meters if you're using the metric system. This week, of course, we're talking about the old dot and bubble there, Mr. Aaron. How exciting was this particular episode? And, of course, as always, there will be spoilers. So if you haven't seen the episode, I'm sure everybody has at this point. We're going to be telling you all about what went on. Now, as always, we're doing the old breakdown of the good, the bad, and the ugly regarding this particular episode. And Mr. Aaron, where did you want to kick this off, son? Of course, we're starting with the good, but thoughts, mate? What's the deal?
Well, this is an episode that I went into totally blind as to what it was going to be about. And Dot and Bubble really doesn't give you much of an idea from the title what it's actually going to be. And then, of course, you see it and instantly it makes sense straight away. Makes sense to the point where you're like, something like this is actually going to happen at some point.
Well, that's exactly right. And, of course, it all kicks off. I don't even know who the actress is. I've forgotten the girl's name, the character's name. What was her name?
The character's name was Lindsay Pepperbean, and the actress's...
Sorry, I don't need the actress. I just want the character's name. So you got Lindsay down the bottom there, and she wakes up, right? And and straight away she activates her bubble, as it were. So, Mr. Aaron, did it push your buttons, as it were? Were you like completely losing it over the good old dotties?
Well, let's take it one good point at a time. This was the opening of the episode, and I thought it did a brilliant job in 30 seconds of setting up their advanced technology in the future with a dome over them, protected in a futuristic city. With seconds to establish that. It was almost like Michael Sheen on the screens, but it wasn't him. And to give you an example of a contrast, I've put a picture in there between this episode, Dot and Bubble, and an episode of Doctor Who from the 80s called Paradise Towers, where we just got that one little shot in the bottom corner to establish the setup for the show. So I thought straight out of the gate, they did a really good job in taking the audience to where the episode was actually set.
Yeah, so it's the world was an interesting one, and what I found particularly appealing with it, which is actually not a good thing at all, is the mindset of how people are so wrapped up in technology. Now, there are some bits that you can look at and go, okay, there are some aspects of this lifestyle that this character is leading that we don't really get to see much about, and we'll cover that off as we go along. But the idea that the moment a person wakes up and all they want to do is activate effectively their social media system that completely envelopes them. I was really intrigued by this concept because this is an extreme version of what social media is today. And I thought straight away, if there are people in the real world who could adopt this technology, right, and have this thing around their head the whole time, they would. And that is not a good indictment for society, especially younger people as we know it.
Well, I can see how this could go, because you've seen people walking around in their with
Hmm.
their iPhones talking and sort of bumping into stuff. If the iPhone released an app that said you don't have to look when you are walking around anymore, we'll just go forward,
Yep.
left, whatever, there would be some people that would take it up and would not get off their screens while they walk. I'm one of those people who, frustratingly, people get frustrated with me because I don't answer my phone a lot and I don't reply to messages, because I don't want to be contacted 24 hours a day and I don't want to be plugged into the internet. There's more to life than that. But there are people, my son, who would
Mm,
absolutely love to go that way. And I don't know if you saw, she slept with the dot next to her, like a lot of
mm.
people sleep with their mobile phones. And as soon as she opened her eyes, she said, "Dot
Woke
on,
up.
bubble on," and in she goes. So I thought this was a fantastic concept, very, very almost a Black Mirror concept.
Yeah, and we'll cover a bit more off it about it as we get further along. And you are right; she's awakened. She activates it, goes into the bathroom to do to clean her teeth. And you are right; the fact that the thing gives you directions as to where to go avoids the whole issue. And of course, that is clearly relating, as you said, with people on their phones today. And if you could just go, okay, I'll just block out the whole world around me. All I'm doing is just looking and conversing with other people. You're thinking, well, okay, where's this going? Now, it's interesting to note that they're obviously the people are all quite young and they're all quite attractive. And considering that she only works a couple of hours a day and the rest of the time they spend partying, which you would have to
Yeah.
assume involves, I don't know what that would involve, just standing around, just talking to each other, as opposed to physically going to a spot and then deactivating the dots. That wouldn't happen. So we're not entirely sure where that would come from. But everyone we saw in the show, especially on the screens, they're all young, attractive people, and we know it's an exclusive club. We know that because you have to have a fair bit of money behind you, and there's a certain age limit as well. But yeah, I thought it's something that you look at and you go, oh, this is a really terrifying concept. But you can imagine people out there, as you said, like your son would say, that's grouse. Where can I get that? And the fact that people want to be like that, where they don't interact with anybody at all physically, that is not a good thing. So, yeah, very, very cool. You've put up this image, which I thought was quite funny. It's like you and I are now appearing in the bubble. Is that right?
That was just a joke. I thought, what would you do? What would she be watching while she's brushing her teeth? Of course, it's DNA reviews on Doctor Who episodes. But yeah, it is one of those things though, where even when they're brushing their teeth, even when they're using the bathroom, they're connected and talking to people, and you have this thing. 2 weeks running, Doctor Who has talked about peeing and taking a leak. Sometimes you see patterns in things that aren't there, but I did think that was unusual. What did you think? I just thought it was really unusual where the doctor said, "Oh, for 3 days running, you don't need to go to the bathroom."
Oh, I missed that. I've only watched the episode once.
Okay. I just
So
thought that
yeah.
that was really unusual. It paid off in a joke later where the doctor comes back and goes, "Suddenly you need to go to the bathroom quite quickly."
Ah, yes, that's right. He pops up and he's like you're getting medical advice online,
Yeah.
and you can understand from a certain point of view how the system could work really, really well. All the people you really need to connect to can just pop up and give you whatever advice you need, and they're obviously being monitored on a regular basis. For all we know, this entire place is like some big social experiment. And of course, everybody else would be doing exactly the same thing. Wherever they are, they're just sitting there looking at all these screens. And I did like the idea that they all had various numbers of subscriptions of people who'd subscribed to them and following them and whatever else. So clearly,
Yeah.
if you're a new person, you've got to build up your profile. And our main character, what was her name again? Leslie, Lisa,
Uh, Lindsay Pepperbean.
Lindsay was, had a bit of a decent following, and there's clearly, obviously, a bit of a popularity thing going on there, which of course relates exactly to real life. If you were going to put a dark spin on it, you go, okay, how would social media? This is like a variation of social media bullying, persecution, and ostracization of people. How would that occur in this environment? You can imagine if that occurred here in this city, then it would actually have a very detrimental impact with people with like images of all these people popping up saying, "We hate you. You're awful. Yeah, you're a fat person. Oh, you turn up. Oh, yeah, you're arrogant. Whatever." You'd be knocking yourself off in no time. So it could
Well,
go
the thing is,
extreme the other
they
way.
kind of they kind of already addressed that by sort of saying we're the young, beautiful people, and you have to have
Yes.
money to get in. But there is you've probably only seen it once, so you won't have noticed. There is quite a dark subplot in this story, the whole story through, where she's a bigot. and
Mhm.
you get her like, did you know? I don't know if you noticed. We'll talk about this later. BBC have gender and race diversity
Mm.
rules. So as soon as I saw the wall and they're all white people, I was like, this is a plot point because otherwise there would be other people on the wall. And when the doctor turns up, she instantly like, oh, I don't like you, swipe you sideways kind of thing.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that actually, but yeah, now that you've mentioned it, that's actually quite good. You'd be curious to see if other people have said, "Oh, yeah, what's the deal? Why aren't there any people of like mixed heritage and whatever else?" So sticking with the good, and I like the idea. Yeah, she goes to her office, and the people she's supposed to be working with are in. They're supposed to be in the same room with her, and she's completely oblivious to the fact that they're not there. What a bizarre idea! They only work for 2 hours, right? And from her perspective, it's oh my god, we're being pushed to the extreme. It's unusual, but it really worked. And I like the fact the desk is completely empty. You don't need computers anymore, any of that sort of stuff. But yeah, wasn't even aware that her compatriots weren't in the same room with her. So I thought that was really unusual or
it
surprising.
was a it was a good introduction to the monsters as well. It's one of those don't actually show them a lot, but the reaction and what's going on. And I did think it was interesting that she could look through the bubble without turning it off, but obviously they never ever do. So even that was a bit traumatic for
Mm.
her. I thought it was a really, really tense, well directed sequence.
See, that's working on the same view of people saying, "Oh, switch off your phone and just leave it aside for a few hours." And some people out there just can't. The younger people, in particular, there was a thing on the news recently where they're talking to school kids, and the school kids are saying they just look at it for 5 minutes and 3 hours goes past, or as soon as it goes
Yeah,
bing, they just got to go and check it straight away. So it's taken this concept and pushed it to a massively extreme example, and of course, it impacts this character so much that when she does deactivate it, she's effectively useless, and she's saying, oh, "I'm stupid," and
yeah,
the reality is she is stupid because
she is.
it's completely consumed their life. Now, the interesting thing is that in this show they say between 17 and 27, I think it is the age that you can use this particular beat, this location, and use the bubble and whatever.
Yeah,
So what happens when you turn 28? Do you get kicked out and you just get sent home, or you're voted off the island or whatever? So is that covered off? Is it?
carousel, carousel.
Go to carousel. You got to renew. So you do wonder if you turn up at 17 and you spend like 10 years of your life effectively with this thing around your head, assuming it's just here and not anywhere else, and it's all encompassing, all engrossing. You've built up hundreds of millions of subscribers, and you get to 28 and you've got to go home. I reckon there'd be like jumping off bridges and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the dark side. That's a really dark side to the technology. What looks good at face value has a really sinister edge to it, and that's why
Well, you
it's not all roses.
you do get a very, very quick snapshot of Homeworld, and it does not look like a nice place anyway.
Yeah, we'll get to the home world a bit later on. So this one
Yeah,
is an interesting one. You've got the aliens that pop up. I guess for Docky Who aliens, they would rank as at least the good quality looking, even though they're a bit unusual and stood right out. But you like them?
I put them in the good. For the thing about aliens is usually you get a Star Trek alien where it's a person with like ridges on their head or a different color or something like this. They made these practical, so they actually made the
Mm,
giant slugs, and then obviously they augmented them with CGI. But I thought they were quite a good villain for a monster. They're not ones that are fast or slow, fast or stealthy. They sort of are just there and eat you. You walk into them, kind of thing. It is interesting. I had the thing I often do for myself is ruin Doctor Who episodes by thinking up alternates that are slightly better than what the storyline is for them. But we'll come up with that. But I did think, as a practical effect, I couldn't really fault them.
yeah. It's surprising because they really jarred when you see them out in the open. And you go, wow, that is like, monsters like that usually hide in the dark, as you know, and like
Yeah,
in shadowy areas and whatever. And in this one, they're in broad daylight. And it is interesting that the people with their bubbles, because the bubbles can't see the aliens, just walk straight into them and just getting eaten and go, okay, fair enough. And like her version actually walked around, not the bubble, not the alien, but the guy's legs on the ground, which are going to show
yeah,
here. And I thought that's actually quite interesting. She's completely oblivious to everything going on around her, which means that you're at the mercy of the technology not failing. I mean, it would have to have collision detection and all this sort of thing. So you'd be passing other people in the street. And the thing is telling you turn left, turn right. And the one coming the other way is saying turn right so they don't collide. And it's
yeah.
like you wouldn't connect with anyone. So it's such an unusual concept.
Yeah.
Ads has said the
Well,
slugs weren't aliens, AI manufactured. I don't know if he's cracking a joke there, or is it being truthful?
no, in the story they said they were manufactured by the dots. Um, I
Ah,
I I do that isn't really. They just the doctor proposes that isn't really
yep.
explain more than that one line, but it could be. But I put that picture up not
Oh,
because of the aliens.
yep.
Oh, again, I thought it was incredibly well directed. If you look, you had pictures from outside high-rise buildings. You had shots going down on the character from above and things like that. Again, this series of Doctor Who, I've definitely noticed has upped the visual direction of the show. It could have been really boring, having a show with one main character, the protagonist, close up face a lot of the time, but never did I think it got boring. And I've watched it a couple of times. So I think they did a really good job to keep it moving along as well.
Actually, speaking of that, like it's such an unusual concept to have the camera in someone's face, like just the top of the head and the bottom of the jaw, for
Yeah,
such a long period of time. I mean, for the actress's point of view, now anybody who knows about photography, they didn't put the camera at the other side of the room; it would have been right here in front of her, right? That would be so disconcerting to have it so close, and it's like everything is showing up. And what I found interesting is that now I could be wrong, but she has these really blue eyes, these really really attractive eyes, and I'm certain, based on my one time viewing, that when she turns the bubble off, her eyes go darker. So I don't know if that's true, because I remember later on I thought, oh, her eyes kind of gone brown rather than the
yeah.
bright blue. So I don't know if that's me just seeing something. So
Maybe they have
um,
maybe they have a filter to look nicer because that would be very, very narcissistic in how they live, kind of thing. I don't know if you'd have picked this up. Being a movie maker, you might have, but I think it's on the next slide. I talk about it. I could be wrong. Yes, when she's in the bubble, and I
mm,
think this is a psychological thing. I don't know if you noticed it. When she's in the bubble, she's always fills the whole screen, and I think it's because when she's in the bubble, she's the center of her own world. When she's out of the bubble, she's always
yeah.
very small, and there's lots of shots far away, and she's not the center of the shot. She's very small in the world then, and I think that's a psychological thing where it shows you like Colin said, it's Linus's blanket. It's a security thing. You feel much better when you're in the bubble because you are the center of your world. Everything revolves around you. And I thought it was really good storytelling that when she's out of the bubble, there's lots of, long shots where she's a very small person in a big world. Did you notice
That's
that?
actually no, but now that you've brought it up, that's actually makes a lot of sense, because one thing about social media is that it's all about me, right? What can
Yeah,
I do? What can I post that other people are looking at, reposting, retweeting, whatever? And even though people are looking at what other people are doing on social media, everyone is thinking, what can I do to get my name out there, get my face out there, get my post out there? And of course,
yeah,
everybody's looking to say, how many likes did I get? How many views did I get? How many retweets? Whatever, right? It is such a big ego driven thing. And
yeah,
it would make sense that you're right. When she's got the bubble on, she does fill the screen because she's her own world. And the moment she's talking to people and they're talking back to her, she's the queen of the hill. So you are right. So when the bubble's off, she's just a normal person. And the thing I found intriguing, right now, my other half, Lynn, watched this and she couldn't understand it. She takes the bubble off and she can't walk. She doesn't know how to
yeah,
walk properly. Now, to be fair, they kind of cheated later on because then she's walking normally. But she's walking into the tables because she hasn't been given directions as to what to do. And even though at face value that looks kind of silly and a bit ridiculous, it makes so much sense to say, I've been given these instructions on how to do something for so long, remembering that with the bubble on, she wouldn't actually see her own feet if she looked down, right? So it's just an automatic response. Walk because the thing's telling me to walk. Now I've got to do it on my own. I don't know how to. I'm just crashing into the tables. And I found that really interesting. And that is a really good warning sign about what happens when the technology has too much power over the individual. So I
yeah.
took a lot out of that, even though when she walks into the post later on, which I thought was particularly cool. So yeah, that was really,
we,
really
we've
good.
got some we've got some different opinions on bits and pieces then. But the thing you're absolutely right. If you lived in that bubble 99% of your life, I reckon most of the people when they turned it off would have instant what is it when agoraphobia when you can't
Yeah,
go
when you're kind of afraid
outside?
about going outside. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
because
if,
you would not. Yeah, sorry.
oh, no, keep going.
Yeah, no, because you would not have ever that depth of seeing everything, so it would just be all overwhelming to you.
And also, you do wonder if they all turned the bubbles off at the same time and they were all in the same room at the same time, would they actually be able to handle it? So she's used to having people in the office with her, but when they've all got their bubbles on, so physical connectivity doesn't really work. So would they be able to cope? Now, you can almost bet your bottom dollar nobody would be able to communicate because they're just so used to the technology. And that's an extension of what's going on today with social media messaging and whatever else. I mean, there's been plenty of jokes and stories about couples who'll sit together at the same table. Instead of physically talking to each other, they're just sending messages. How are you today, dear? How was work? My day was good, blah, 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 blah. And you laugh at that. But sometimes you see examples where that could actually happen because people can't communicate face to face. And I reckon this is an extension of that. Now, that's the end of the goods. Now, there was something I wanted to bring up, and you didn't bring it up. And I'm curious to see whether you picked up on it or not. When the guy gets killed in the square and she walks around him, he gets dragged off and the blood is green. Did you pick up on that?
Well, the thing is, these are the only aliens I think ever that you haven't seen moving around. All of them are stationary, and I wondered if that was like the snail, mucus. So it could be, or it could be green blood. But I did notice that. I just didn't put it because I wasn't quite sure what it was meant to be.
When I saw it on the screen, I first thought it was blood. And I thought, well, that's interesting. It goes to show that we're not dealing necessarily with human beings. We're dealing with humanoid
Yeah.
beings from another planet, right?
Yep.
And also it reduces the gore factor. It's because the same thing they did in Flash Gordon. Change the blood to a different color. You can chuck in tons of the stuff, right? Turn it red, and grosses out the audience. And I thought,
It is.
because I saw it. Hang on.
Sorry.
And I saw it straight away. I said, oh my god, there's green blood. I was like, that is gross. So I'm interpreting it as being blood. Sorry, go for it, dude.
I can actually definitely say it's the slime because he got his head blown out and it was red.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Fair enough. Oh, what a bummer. So I like the idea that it was. Yeah, because that's right. It was right off the side of the screen, wasn't it? And his head gets shot out. Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah. We have pictures later just to prove it.
Yeah, fair enough. The doc goes to the guy's head, possibly the most graphic death I've seen in Doctor Who. Well, you sort of see it and kind of don't see it. It's very subtle. They've obviously said, how far can we push the camera off to the right? Anyway, all right, that's a shame because I thought it was going to be the blood because they made such a point of putting it in. And yeah, it was very, very cool.
Yeah.
Very, very groovy. Yes, exactly right. Balkans invading the Doctor Who universe. So that's the end of the goods, believe it or not. Now, there's probably going to be things that we cover off along the way. We're now going to tackle into the bads. And funnily enough, the first thing that occurs in this particular episode is when both the Docky and Ruby turn up. And once again, the Docky and Ruby are barely in this episode, except for when they're appearing on a screen. Mr. Aaron didn't like it.
Now, one of the things that you said was a good. I was a bad. I did not think that I can't walk without the bubble on was something that was particularly good. So when she sang I can't walk without the bubble, you see in the morning they do put the bubble on, but they sleep without it. I do think, has it really got to the point, where it's almost like if that's the point, they shouldn't even come out of their house anymore kind of thing.
But I can use, you are right. And that's an extreme example. But the same extreme example actually occurs in real life when you've got people driving cars and their GPS says go this way and they'll follow blindly, even if it's going off a cliff or into a river. And they go, well, I went that way because the GPS told me to. And they can physically see that it's going the wrong way. So what it's saying is that people get in this story, they get so reliant on technology that when it's removed, they actually don't know how to operate. And of course, from her perspective, she's seeing the room, she's seeing everything around her, probably even for the first time. And she's like tripping out. And it's like, I've forgotten how to do it because when she's normally walking, she just says forward and it just clicks into move forward mode. Take that away. And it's like, I've forgotten how to do it. So that's how I interpreted it. So, I mean, it was a little bit long, a little bit dumb, but I kind of got where they were coming from. Yeah.
I guess for me, because I've seen it a couple of times, 10 minutes later, she's hop skipping and running downstairs and doing all types of stuff. So
that was something I picked up on, and I thought, they've cheated now. They've said, she's really adapting really fast, and I go, okay, that one I didn't agree with.
If they had kept it consistent through the episode, it wouldn't have been a bad. And this goes into the same thing. Okay, you can't walk. I did think it was clever. She was giving the directions to herself, saying forward, forward, forward. But if she's doing that, she should see the pole and go turn left, and go around it. And if you hit it once, you don't take 2 steps back and hit it again. I mean, you have some level of self-preservation no matter what,
Yeah, look, I agree with you. What that is saying is that it's the people on the phone scenario where they walk into things and walk off into swimming pools and crash into bits and pieces because they're not looking where they go. It's just an extension of that. And of course, when you see that occurring and you go, why didn't you, weren't you looking where you're going? And of course, no one learns from it. All right. So you would think that if Fred with his phone is looking at it while he's walking down the street and walks into a post, you think, well, okay, that's it. Never again am I ever going to walk with my phone. Now they'll just go around it, back on the phone, and continue on. And I think that's what they're trying to say. And I got it. I really, really did get it. So yeah,
Yeah.
even though
The other thing, Dags,
yeah.
I really, really liked this episode. So I was actually struggling for really valid bads in this one.
Oh, look, I totally get it because even my other half said, "What the hell is she walking to the post for?" And then she writes, she backs off and walks into it again. I got it where they were coming from. It's very sarcastic and it's very subtle. And in real
Yeah.
life, it wouldn't do it. She'd stop and go, "Okay, turn left, turn right, and go around." But I really got where they were coming from. And we can continue on. So yeah, the Ruby and the Docky, they had a good time in this episode. They just spent the whole time in the studio on a screen. How good was that?
So we've jumped forward a bit, and this is a plot bad. You know, they're trying to work out all through the episode, like why they're getting killed in an order kind of thing, and it's
Yep.
alphabetical. I think what you actually said kind of goes into what would have been a better thing. I thought it would have been a better explanation. Ricky, September, and she were left because they were going in social credit order. So the more likes you have, they were leaving you for last. And I thought that would fit into the story about popularity a lot better. It was done on the Orville, so it would have been a bit of a cheat. But I did think with the whole how everything's controlled by social media. If Ricky November, he said everyone's my friend, and I was like, oh, that's why he survives, because he's got the most friends and she's super popular. So when it was like it's alphabetical, that was a bit of a letdown for me.
Yeah, there's two things that I didn't understand. I didn't understand who would have made it alphabetical. I thought, really? It's like, no, that's a bizarre one at the best of times. And I don't know if we're going to cover it off, but I didn't understand where the monsters, the aliens, actually came from. That is, I could
Well,
not put. Yeah.
Ads was right. He said, "Oh, they must have." The doctor said they must have been created by the artificial intelligence to wipe everyone out, which is another plot thing for me. Because if you had control over the population like that, just march them all up onto the roofs and get them to Junior Birdman off, kind of thing.
Get the
What
lemming
I
thing
would have
action.
thought was would have fixed the story. I thought it would have been cool if they were the waste disposal. So all the garbage from this place, they had
Yeah.
the indigenous slugs just eat it. And when the AI went, chicken oriental, it just started marching everyone into them and like killing them. And I thought that would have, they were on a lush planet and they presumed it was from outside. I just thought that would have been a better resolution, but that's not what they went with. So that's me
No,
letting myself down.
yeah, no, that's fair enough. I mean, I thought it was like an invading alien species, and when they tried to explain
Yeah.
blah 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 blah, it's the dots doing it all. I go, what? That I don't know. There was something that disconnected there, and because in the end, and we'll probably cover this off. If the
Yeah.
dots physically can kill the person they're with, why don't they just kill them all? It was weird. I mean, it looked good. And it was a lot of tension and all the rest of it. I kind of I had no problem with it, but the explanation as to what they were, that's the bit that kind of lost me. So
Yeah.
anyway, so we got the code. Some of this was a bit on the weird side. What a 10,000 freaking
Well, I
numbers
won't.
for a door.
Yeah, I won't read that. That's exactly right. You have a code for a door, right? You do not have a sequence of 100 numbers you have to put in one after the other with 5 seconds, because what if something's trying to kill you? I was just like, come on, that's like a plot point. That's pretty lazy. They could have written something better than that. It would have been better cracking a code than having a code that's just, unrealistic. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, true. I'll get to Greg in a second. And the other thing I thought, sorry guys, you've broken your own rules. When Ricky September gets the girl to go to the door and she's put the numbers in, and she's like, hang on, she's adapted pretty damn fast after having a frigging bubble in her head for all this time and trying to open the door manually and whatever. I was like,
Yeah.
no, that wouldn't have worked.
I do think she could put numbers in because they said she was sorting substacks or something. So maybe, but opening the door, I don't think they opened a door in
No.
their life.
No, I tend to agree, especially without the bubble. So Greg says he agrees. He felt that way more backstory for the slugs. Yeah, that was definitely a weak element, especially when later on we discovered the dots can actually kill people. They could have just done it all in one big, had it all out at the same time. So
Yeah.
Anyway, not to worry. So, speaking of which, we're talking about the dots now. So the dots go a bit troppo in the end,
Does
which I thought was
one of
interesting.
my most hated sci-fi tropes, which we talked about last week on, talking stuff, where when something goes bad, it has a red mode. Like,
Yeah, mate.
do you know what? If you're a scientist and you're creating technology, just never put any red LEDs in it. It doesn't matter about, all the different laws of robotics. If it can't get red eyes or it can't turn red, can never hurt you.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Yeah, this was interesting. When they finally worked it out that the dots were cracking the shits effectively and wanted to knock everybody off, I thought, they're going the really long, hard way about it. Okay, you've somehow created the aliens. They're doing it alphabetically. That makes no sense whatsoever. And then we discover the dots, after they turn red, can actually kill the individuals. And I go, well, yeah, as I just said a moment ago, they could easily have just said, press the button. They all kill everybody at the same time. There was a bit missing in the explanation as to why it was such a long and laborious process to use the aliens and why the dots didn't do it.
See,
That I
what you
think
have
detracted from it.
I think they should have done something about AI can never kill a human, so they were actually just getting the slugs to do their dirty work or something like that. You're right; it
Yeah,
needed a bit more explanation.
yeah. And then finally, after all that, I mean, the good old Docky and Ruby actually physically get to appear. So once again, they're not the center point of this episode at all. If anything, once again, Ruby has more screen time than the Doctor does. And of course, you get to see the dark side of the girl. And
Yes.
I thought, wow, that was really interesting. So, what do you reckon of that, Mr. Aaron?
Well, the dark side of the girl isn't good. It isn't bad. We'll discuss that later. The ending for me is we have just been shown 40 minutes where these people can't even walk in a straight line, and they've got down, and somehow they're going to not go with the Doctor. They're going to go on like a ship out into Jurassic Park by the look of it, and they're all going to be killed within 3 days.
Yes, that's kind of, I mean, when they got to this dock thing and all these people are walking around, and I go, hang on, who are all these dudes, right? And how are they surviving so well? And I totally agree with you. It's almost like you're saying to someone, you've lived in this world, we're going to show you such an alien planet that, yeah, up until this very second, you didn't even know existed really or had no
Yeah,
interest in. And then suddenly you're going to go venture off into it because you're just effectively following the leader. Something was missing out of that point, and it made no sense. So you're right. So aside from now walking, talking, and whatever else, she's now jumping in boats and sailing off into the
yeah,
sunset. And they are all going to die. And I don't think it'll be 3 days. I reckon they'll be lucky to last a single day once they realise just how in dire straits they are. And the fact that they're actually loading provisions on the boat, I thought they wouldn't even know what provisions are. They would just jump on and go if they were going to do it. So something
yeah.
was missing here. So I don't know what it was, whether it was intended padding or whatever. And you're right. So the Doctor's saying to the girl, come and join us on the TARDIS. And of course, I get why they didn't go on board. To them, it was like, there's a blue box. They've just been told this stuff. Why would they necessarily believe it? And as you said earlier on, maybe it's a racial thing. She says to him that he's not one of them. I
Yeah.
thought that could be interpreted in a couple of different ways. So, yeah, I agree. That's not even 3 hours. They'd get out there and they'd just be juicy fruited from the outset. So, yeah, I got a bit. That's unusual. So,
Yeah.
but yes. Anything you want to say before we move on?
No, let's move on.
All right. So that was the end of the bads. Now we get into the dark stuff. We got the ugly. So get a bit of the terminology, Mr. Aaron, didn't work for you.
No. The ugly is not good or bad. It's just discussable things. And I think this was really interesting. A lot of the time in science fiction, they do future, but they never do anything about the language. And I did think this took a page out of Clockwork Orange book. I don't know if you saw the speech and the language was slightly modified to be futuristic. So, oh my hopscotch, that's a relief. And this is so manual. And they're going to be righteous, and they're talking about the weed killers and stuff like that. I was like, oh, at least they've actually tried to do something to differentiate them being in the future with their speech patterns as well, which is something you don't really see in shows often at all.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. One of the things that I couldn't work out, and I thought, okay, they're going to avoid certain things, right? And one of the things is like the girl at the start, she's drinking the juice or whatever. Where does all the food come from? Who provides that? Where do they get it? Who does the shopping? Does it just magically appear in their houses? So I don't know. Obviously, trips to the
I
cafe
presume
wouldn't really happen. What?
I presume in the next bubble city, the people who R27 get turned into Soylent Green and shipped to the city beside them, so you're not eating one of your friends. Like,
Yeah, well, no, I was referring to like, well, where does she get her food from? Like, yeah, as I said, you see at the start, like, who replaces the toothpaste and the toothbrushes? Like, where is the local shops? Now, you would think if you've spent that much money being in this special world, there are certain privileges, and one of the things is you never actually have to physically do anything. You don't have to go anywhere, right? Now, you
yeah,
can
yeah,
ask the question, if the people are being so well looked after, how is it that they themselves look slim? Yeah, slim and attractive, because clearly physical exercise wouldn't be a priority, because to do that, you imagine, I can't imagine things saying run this way, run that way. Maybe it does and we just didn't see it. I don't know. But I
yeah.
was thinking, where does all the food, how does the sustainability of the actual environment occur? I think they just bypassed that part of the story, which makes sense. You don't need to sort of, who does the dry cleaning, for example? Where does that occur, and who cleans the streets and whatever? So anyway, it doesn't matter.
When they were working, they should have been on exercise bikes for 2 hours or something.
Yeah, maybe. So you reckon the dots look a little bit like Hal? And I tend to agree. I think the similarities, like it's his ugly cousin from, get it, the ugly cousin from way back when. Red dots, dude.
Well, I thought this was a shining example of a Doctor Who episode because there were so many Kubrick sort of call outs. Now, I don't know if it would have been on purpose, but when I was watching it, there were two times where she walked from the back of the room to the front, and just the triangles, were very, very similar to the Kubrick space station kind of thing. And yes, Hal looks almost exactly, well, the eye looks almost exactly like the dot when it goes bad.
So here's a question for you. In the top right hand corner, you got her working through the office, and you got all the light globes in the top of the office. Conceivably, if you got the bubble on all the time, you actually don't need lights in the office, because that would provide all the illumination. You're not looking at the world around you. So
Yeah.
conceivably, in a realistic environment, nobody actually needs a light switch, because you're not looking at anything and you're being told where to go anyway. So I reckon that would have been interesting
Yeah.
if it would have been she opens her eyes and the only natural light coming through is from the windows, but there's no lights above because they don't need them.
Well, when one of the lights goes out, who changes the light bulb? How many AIs does it take to change a light bulb? What do they get ladder, step up, step, screw, unscrew, screw, bayonet, pull, you know?
So that's why I think somewhere in the city there'd be some kind of like robotic system in place to fix all these things, but you never saw that. And of course, for a TV show, it would have been too hard, too expensive, whatever else. I mean, I agree with what you said earlier. It wouldn't be funny if it was the slugs that were doing all this menial work and they'd end up revolting and eating all the people. But yeah, if you want to analyze it to that degree, we're not. But if you wanted to, you could and go, all right, fair enough. What's the details? But yeah, I did find that interesting. You could actually live your entire life in darkness, but even though you got the thing on, I mean, imagine that she takes the bubble down and goes, "Oh, I can't see anything. There's no lights on." Well, you don't need the lights on. So, yeah. Anyway, not to worry. So,
Yeah.
very good. Now, you
Now,
go
I
on.
did think there were a lot of call outs to other movies in this. I don't know if you noticed when the ship was pulling out, it looked very much like the Wonkatania from Willy Wonka, right
Yeah.
down to the little flaps of material and the thing on the top. And I was like, do you know what? Much like the kids on the Wonkatania, they're going for a really psychedelic, horrible trip. And the other one, I don't know if you noticed, we had the Dark Slug Rises. We had the Batman looking over Gotham shot when we looked at the homeworld.
No, I didn't. You've obviously spent too much time in front of the television. I've got to say, when they showed the home world, I think it's Ricky September looks at it and realizes the whole population's been destroyed. Now, I'm assuming they're saying that maybe the population back home also live with the dots around them and whatever else, but they've all been wiped out. I really like that. Right? I thought that was
Yes.
great. He said, "Oh, we'll just contact back home. All of the world's been destroyed, eaten a shimmin by the alien." That's why he thought, "Oh, they've got to be aliens, right? Because they've just taken over everything." And they must be thinking, "This is grouse. These idiots are just walking straight into our mouths. Just open up and in they go." Um,
Yeah.
I thought that was awesome. And then, of course, he tells a porcupine to her. And, of course, in the end, she turns on him anyway. So I liked it. I thought it was good. The home world's been destroyed. So, yeah, it's very
Yeah.
cool.
So yeah, that was a bit of a twist I didn't see coming. I actually thought they'd shipped off all the idiots to the pleasure planet kind of thing, but no, they had the home
Yeah.
world had the same problems as well.
Yeah, I thought that was actually really, really cool. So, yeah.
Now this is the thing, I've put it in the ugly. I thought it was good, but this is what I was talking about for you know, like how through the whole episode she was saying like racist and bigoted things. It was just, you didn't actually notice it because it was just part of the conversation. But when the doctor first turns up, she's like, no, no, thank you, and just slides him sideways straight away. And she's like, didn't I block you? I knew it. And she said, I thought I blocked you. You all look the same. Now, that's a very racial, they all look the same, don't they, Dags? That's a very racial thing to say. And then she actually says to him, I knew I was right to hate you. This is midway through the episode where he's trying to help her. And then he says, you're stupid, Jiminy, you're stupid. We couldn't travel with you because you're not one of us. I mean, screen to screen contact is just about acceptable, but in person, no, because it's our God-given duty to maintain the standards of fine time. And the last one there, the guy comes up who's the new leader and says, if you turn away, ladies, before you become contaminated. So there's quite a bit of bigotry going on there for a Doctor Who episode.
Yeah, there's a lot to take out of that. And it does show about, and I'm trying to probably read more into this than what needs to be the case, but how the corruption of people isn't that difficult when you sit and think about it. And funnily enough, even in the real world right now, there's a huge us and them scenario going on. And I think that if you corrupt people young enough, they'll believe anything they get told. And we've seen this throughout history. In this particular story, the fact that she says it's a God-given right, so there's clearly a religious thing going on there, that they've got to maintain the standards of fine time. And anything that's different is not to be trusted. And the thing about contamination, there's a lot to delve into regarding that and where they're coming from. And you do have to sit and analyze and go, okay, what is the actual underlying theme of this story? Is it the corruption of young people into, one, the technological revolution, if you will, and is there systemic racism everywhere? And this is just really highlighting it. I don't know. There's a lot to take out of it, I'm going to say. So we could probably spend a long time debating the merits of it, and in the end, it could just be quite superficial. But you are right, though. There were some really interesting sort of moments there to take on board. We'll get back to that a bit later on because there's something I want to bring up. All right, so there you go. And of course, the old lady reappears again. So, and I did like it this time. They're now starting to recognize her.
Yeah. So again, it's one of those things where Ruby doesn't recognize her as quickly as the Doctor. Ruby kind of knows her from a timeline that didn't happen. Although we don't know that when they walked down the hill, she didn't just bump into the woman doing the hike anyway. But the Doctor now recognizes her, and they're like, I've seen her before. She was the ambulance and all of that, the face of the ambulance. But the interesting thing he says is, we'll save that for later, and he actually saves it on the sonic screwdriver this time. So obviously she's hit the radar enough for him to be interested and going to investigate it.
Yes, so we've picked up on it, as in the audience has picked up on it. Now the characters are picking up on it as well, and there's clearly something there.
Yeah.
I like this one. You've come up with obviously a joke thing. We're talking about Slug Island for the place that we're in, the fine time or whatever it is.
Yeah, well, they actually said, well, it's like Love Island, but on a planet.
They did,
and I actually,
yes, they did.
So I actually thought, you know what? Like Love Island would be 100% better if they put like giant slugs and they had to escape the monsters while they were on the show. That'd be fantastic.
So what it's telling you is that this place, Fine Time, is like for the elite of the elite. And there would probably be people who say, I've got the money to go. I'm the right age to go, but I can't get in because I'm not pretty enough. I'm not good looking enough, or I don't meet the criteria. Now, we don't know about the home planet. For all we know on the home planet, it could be like Earth, mixed races everywhere. And whoever's created this Fine Time thing has said, oh, no. It's only exclusive for this group of people. Okay. And I think that's actually quite interesting. The story would have been, imagine this as a scenario that this entire episode is completely redone and every single person on, is it Fine Time, are from a different persuasion, like Asian, African-American, whatever else, right? Then I think the racial thing would have a lot more impact. I mean, admittedly, you wouldn't do it for a show because you probably alienate a large part of the audience, but the idea being to say, this is actually a good example of what we're trying to say. So back in the home world, there could be all these people who say, I've got the money to go, but I can't get in because I don't fit the criteria. And the undesirables are being left out. So I reckon that's actually
Yeah.
quite interesting. So yeah.
Now, I think the next one is something that it's just an Aaron thing. I don't think this has been noticed anywhere else online, but I do wonder if it's relevant. Now, if we go back a couple of weeks to Boom, you had the
Yep.
little girl talking about her mum saying, because mum's been gathered up and she's been gathered up to God and he loves her so much, she's been gathered up early and we'll see her again one day, Daddy explained. And then this episode, but what about mum? She's gone to the sky. Well, lucky mum and all of that. And I'm like, that is really unusual for them to be. And I do wonder if this story arc, there's going to be stuff in plain sight that we just haven't noticed because Russell T Davies, who's coming on in the side there, raising his glasses, is actually putting clues. Now, it might just be a total coincidence, but I do think it's unusual to have such similar conversations in two different episodes, such a short season. So
yeah, I think there's
yeah,
probably joining lines where there aren't no lines, but I'm happy to be proven wrong. You never know. That means there's a lot more thought being put into it, and for what is effectively a family show. Now, I did look when it was on Disney Plus. It did actually specifically say, mild violence. They said swearing. There was going to be swearing in this episode. I don't know where that was, and family, blah blah blah. So it's clearly family orientated. So I don't think they're going to
yeah.
go to that level of complexity. So yeah.
Well, this one is really going to blow everyone's mind if it is actually something. There is something happening in this series with language. And it did start in the Christmas specials where you had the Doctor visiting Sir Isaac Newton and saying the word gravity to him, and then him going, that was an interesting word. What was it? Shavity, havity, mavity. And then you see it's actually changed history. So later in the episode, the Doctor and Donna are talking about the air and the gravity, but they say mavity because it's changed. Then in the Boom episode, they talk about when he is turned into the torch thing that they get that turned into when they step on the mines, he's been smelted. And the Doctor says, I've never used the word smelted before. It's never come up. Such a good word, smelted, isn't it? New planet, new word, landmine. And then in this one, you have the same conversation again where they're chap. It's chapping. It's a funny word, isn't it? I get chapped everywhere. I love that word. Now, is that a coincidence that that's come up in 3 episodes?
I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is just a classic thing that's been chucked in for people like you to dig up. That's very good. I mean, I remember the smelting thing from Boom,
Boom.
and I thought, what a bizarre line. It's the smelting. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, okay. So you're right. Maybe there is something in that. I don't know, dude.
It
We'll
is.
have to wait and see.
It is. I think it is really unusual. In 3 episodes, they've gone on about a word and the language and stuff. So I don't know if it's to do with throwing salt at the end of the universe and release it, but it is just when you haven't got that many episodes in the season and you want to make every scene count, to do it 3 times. I think everyone's looking at the woman who's in every episode. Maybe there's other clues as well that we don't know.
Yeah, it could be. We'll have to wait and see. So this is our last of the uglies, actually. So what do you got to say about all this, old son?
Well, I left this to last because poor old Ricky September, probably the nicest character in it. You think he's going to be the vainest, but he turns out nice. The Doctor and Ruby both have a crush on him instantly and think he's hot. I don't know if I like the Doctor
No,
being
I
like
didn't.
that.
I thought, here's a question for you. In any season ever of Doctor Who, going right back to 1963, has the Doctor ever looked at a girl and said, "Oh, she's hot"?
No. In fact,
Yeah.
Tom Baker looks at a girl and he says, "You're very attractive," probably because he doesn't look at those things. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's in the show. And I thought I'd bring it up because it is one of those things that is going to be controversial. But I don't know if it was Ads who said it. This is one of the goriest deaths in Doctor Who ever. It's like a horror movie. After Lindsay throws him under the bus when he's trying to save her by saying, "Oh, he changed his name. He should die first." He gets crushed under a chain and pulley, and they don't pull away. The thing breaks the chain and the pulley hits him square in the head. It's a very almost would be in a horror movie type death. And then he's on the ground because he's so damaged by being hit in the head. He gets up again and sort of staggers around. And then the dot turns into a bullet and basically blows the back of his head out. And you actually see it where you see the dot come through. It's only in a couple of frames, but then you see the blood spray everywhere. There's only like 1 or 2 frames, and I thought that is really pushing it for a kids show. I like it, but I put it in the ugly because I don't know if it's that appropriate for. If you watch Space Babies and go, yeah, I can let my kids watch this, it's fine, and then you came in and you saw this, that could traumatize some kids.
No, I disagree. I think they can get away with it. They'd have to turn around to their mummy and daddy and go, "What happened to Ricky?" And say, "He's okay. He's just gone to sleep." I mean, I thought it was great that they did it. I thought it was really good,
Yes.
and to show how violent it could be. That's why I thought, well, as I said earlier, if the dots can kill the people, why don't they just dots kill everybody? The thing about Ricky September kind of went against the grain a bit because clearly he's obviously older. So maybe somewhere along
Yes.
the way, he's learned to say, I'm going to switch the bubble off and just enjoy the world as it is. So clearly he's a bit more compos mentis with how everything operates. He knows how to get through the tunnels, open the doors, blah, 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 blah. So maybe he's meant to represent the person who is addicted to, we stick back to the social media, the technology, and learns to switch it off and puts the phone down. You know what? I can enjoy the world, the sunshine, because clearly Lindsay wouldn't even know what the sunshine is. And he can operate as an individual, and that's the reason why he can save her life. I thought that was actually quite good. So he's actually the opposite of what's happening today with all the people addicted to technology. But what I really liked is that even though Lindsay has been portrayed as a young woman and she's fantastic and all these friends and blah, 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 when it comes to looking after number one, she instantly turns on Ricky and, as you said, chucks him under the bus, tells the dot, oh, no, his real name starts with C. He's got to die first. And she uses that moment to escape. And there's no element of remorse. There's no element of regret, no tears, nothing. And I found that really interesting. And there's a lot to be taken out of that moment. Is this saying that people who are good people can turn really bad when it comes to self-preservation and not regret what they do? That was a very, very poignant moment. And, he dies and she just out the door. And by the time she catches up with the doctor and Ruby, it's like nothing ever happened. Oh, he's okay. He's got back to save other people. She actually tells a lie about what happened. I don't know. How do you look? There's a fair bit we can cover off on this because it's a really psychological moment.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that moment?
Oh, look, I think it's really good. I think she was a really good character. It was another Doctor and Ruby Light episode, which I thought was you shouldn't be having this season. But she carried the whole show, and it was a good character study. I did think it really did do that thing where the twist in the end where she isn't a nice person and would sell her friend out. And then you see her go in and she is guilty. She doesn't want to talk to the Doctor and Rose, and then she composes herself and just lies to them and then starts insulting him. And so she's very naive, I think, because of the situation she's in.
Yeah.
And also, I do find it hard. This character's been in a bubble her whole life. You could see they were running. Like she says earlier in the episode, this day could be the best day of my life when she meets Ricky September and he hugs her. And she's just lost her 2 best friends and everyone around is dying. That's how self-absorbed she is. And Ricky actually says to him, there's thousands of people dying around us, when she says, this could be the best day of my life.
It's a good point. There's a few comments. I'm going to get to them in a sec. It's interesting because if you're, and I think this is, I'm just trying to rack the thing around in my head. If your entire social life is all based on technology and the people you meet through technology and everyone in the bubble, you never meet in real life. You only see them on the screen. If they're suddenly not there, do you really miss them? Because there's no physical interactivity whatsoever. And let's assume that they're human beings. The whole concept of humanity is the idea of being drawn together, drawn to each other to provide comfort for each other. And if that doesn't happen, then all of a sudden it's just a picture on a screen. So when all these people are disappearing, you're sort of thinking, oh, I'm missing blah. But that's okay. I'm not missing blah. I really don't care about them. And maybe it's what it's doing. It's corrupting the individual's mentality. So even when she's with Ricky in person and thinking, oh my God, he's the coolest dude ever, it's still all about, well, I've got to preserve myself. There really is nothing there between us, and there never will be anything there between us because he's expendable effectively and she's looking out for herself. And I guess that is possibly relatable to real life, where people see each other, on Instagram and Twitter and whatever else. They've got millions of friends, but they're not actually friends at all. So maybe there's something in that. Before we go any further, as I said about the old woman has more airtime than the doctor. That's actually quite funny. Regarding the dot on the head, Shane said it was needed for immediate O factor, and I think it was. It was actually good to see him die. I thought that was actually a really cool moment. But we learned more about Lindsay than we did about anybody else after that. And was she good in the first place? I think the answer is yes. She wasn't like purposely vindictive, but when she's put in a situation where she needs to survive over everything else, and you can work on the view that if she had her friends there, she'd let them all die too. She just didn't know any differently. And of course, the fact that she felt nothing for them afterwards, for Ricky afterwards. And even at the end, when she's saying, oh, I've lost all my friends, all the connections, it doesn't say any of that at all, if I recall. And it's completely cold about it. And it's just always looking forward. So,
well, you saw what the mentality of the society was, because when they were looking through all the dead people, they found one girl who was alive, and she was like, oh, hi, do you want to be my friend? I've lost my friends list. It's got a bit quiet. It was instantly trying to just build that network again.
Yeah, I liked it. I really did. There was something really in that to take on board. And if it's almost, there's a lesson to be learned. And unfortunately, people won't learn it. But, what the hell. That brings us to the end of the episode. And that brings us, of course, to the Rotten Time Lords voting process for Mr. Aaron. So, Mr. Aaron, you've watched this episode a few times. You're drawing all these dots and conclusions that most people haven't picked up on. How did you rate the old, what is it called, dot and bubble?
Well, I'm giving it a 1, which is fresh. Like, we have the reverse ratings where the less it gets, the better, because it hasn't gone rotten. So I thought this was another really, really good episode. I think after the series sort of spluttering at the start, it's really found its legs, and I enjoyed the last 2 episodes really well. What did you think of it?
So before I give the answers, that means, of course, it is certified crinoid fresh. Very, very, very good. For myself, I enjoyed it, not because of what it was, but because of the lessons it was sort of like bringing forth, and I've covered that off already a fair bit today. My other half, Lynn, didn't get it, didn't understand it, and I thought, there's a lot bubbling just under the surface, and there's a lot to take on board here. As to how it impacts people, like from the future, regarding if this bubble thing ever existed in real life, how people would take it on board, I don't know. But I like the idea that she was obsessed with it, taken on. It was like her whole life, and then suddenly, when it wasn't there, she was effectively useless, and then discovered that she was prepared to sacrifice everything so long as she survived, even though we know once they sail out in the boat, they're not going to survive. As has just said, the scene where the dot turns red, Doctor said something about the dot being psychic. Maybe you got to it. Does that ring any bells with you, being psychic?
Maybe, but I do think she was just throwing anything at it she could think of just to try and survive. The other thing that I didn't put up, but it kind of annoys me, the Doctor cried again. There's been a theme this whole series where the Doctor cries quite a lot. And, some people might like that. I just don't think the Doctor should be crying maybe because he can't save them. I think it should annoy him more than crying because of it.
2 things. So when they're around the boat, Lindsay would still be looking after number 1, chucking everybody off the boat to either like feed them to the crocodile so she has more food and water and whatever. Wouldn't surprise me.
Yep.
And 2, it's extremely rare for a Doctor to lose in an episode. Now, you know more about this than I do, but he actually lost. He said, come with us, get in the TARDIS, we'll save your lives. And they all said no. So I can understand him kind of like losing his shit at that point. But I thought that's a really unusual situation where the hero of the story actually doesn't get to save anybody, and they're all going to sail off to their deaths. I applauded that twist, actually, and it would frustrate him. It was like, my God, why doesn't anybody? Everybody always listens to me. I'm the hero. I'm the good guy, and suddenly I'm being ignored. I thought that was quite cool.
Well,
actually.
Ruby was getting more affronted for him. I don't know if you saw, she was like going, oh, I just can't believe this kind of thing. Do you think the Doctor should have tried harder, or do you think the ending with him just shutting the door of the TARDIS was a good ending?
Yeah, I thought it was good. In the end, you just got to concede defeat. And if they're not going to listen to you no matter what. And of course, remember, Ruby is a lot more, I don't know, aware of stuff, I guess. I don't know how else to present that. So I can understand her perspective. But yeah, if the Doctor spending thousands of years of his life and everybody's listened to what he's got to say, and like everybody turns to him, the companions, these guys, the unit guys, everyone says, Doctor, what are we going to do? And the one moment where the Doctor says, I've got a solution, no one listens to him. And I thought that was actually kind of cool. So yeah.
So we're right at the end. I have
Sorry,
another.
not the first time he has lost. I mean, I can't imagine that to be the case, but yeah, I thought it was a good example of it. So yep, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, dude.
We're right at the end. There was one more question that was never explained. Why her? There was a whole city full of people they could have tried to contact. And then when they got her out, why didn't they try and get another one out and find another one and another one? They were only up to the P's. So surely they could have gone into someone else's feed and tried to help other people out.
So I'm going to have to counter your question with a question. If they're doing it alphabetically and she's the one who's next, if they don't kill her and she survives, from the P onwards, are they then allowed to live? Does the system say, all right, we'll jump over Pepper or whatever her name was and go P, R, P, S, P or whatever? Or are the P's onwards going to live on their lives without ever having died? I don't know. How does the system work when it can't find a certain person?
Don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It wasn't explained. I did wonder why they weren't broadcasting on all of them. You're getting eaten. Take like every single one. You're getting eaten. Look like if only 10% like turn it off, you've saved a couple of people.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Yeah, I think that for simplicity purposes, they've said we'll just keep it down to the the simplistic side of it. Here we go. I think they helped the rest of the people down at the river. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they did. So somebody was clearly aware of what was going on and they turned their bubbles off and away they go. Matt, who's joined us for the first time, I think, was it just me or didn't she go because of his race? Yeah, we discussed that earlier, actually. And we do think that there's actually distinct racial overtones in the particular episode. But unfortunately, if you haven't seen that part yet, you'll have to watch the replay of this to see what we thought of it. Very good. Anyway, so that was it. Dot and Bubble, an unusual title, but it actually was a very groovy in the end. And I've got to say, it was actually quite good. It's a thinking person's episode, which was very groovy. What do you reckon of that, Mr. Aaron?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised because I wasn't sure how this one was gonna hold up, but I thought it was a really good episode. I liked it as much as last week for different reasons. Now next week we've got Bridgerton with animals, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and once again, it is 2 episodes in a row where the Doctor and Ruby have not been it. Oh, not the Doctor specifically hasn't been it as much as well. Far out hasn't been in it as much. And they're the episodes that seem to be shining. I don't know if there's something in that for all of us to take on board, but there you go. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to buzz off for this evening. Everyone party hard. We're going to see you next week. We've got a couple of episodes left to go before the series wraps up, so you'll have to join us then. But there you go, Mr. Aaron. Very, very good. Get your Dot and Bubble and off you go.
Have a good night. Dot off, bubble off.
Bubble off, exactly right. See you guys. Take care. All the best. Bye-bye.
See you.